And welcome to Sweet Tea and Tacos. I'm Dave.
And I'm Jen.
And Jen sounds different this week because she's a remote guest this week. We're kind of traveling separately this week. And we have Richard from Bear Claw Knife and Shear. Welcome, Richard.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're really happy and glad you could join us. What are we talking about today, Jennifer?
Well, knives, of course.
Knives,
right?
of course, right. So I had the chance to, we came across Bear Claw Knife and Shear a few months ago in our travels and got to meet Richard, and they have a sharpening class because we've talked about in a previous knife podcast about taking care of your knives and sharpening your knives. And I wanted to know more. I took your class, really enjoyed it, had a great time. You have a ton of information, very knowledgeable. So Richard, tell us a little bit how you got started.
Well, first I'd like to say hello to all our listeners. We're at the same time we're doing a blog with you. We're also videotaping this for our YouTube channel and our YouTube followers. So very excited to be doing this with you. We got started almost 25 years ago. I was in Big Spring, Texas, little town, and I was passing by what was once the store. It had been closed down for a few years. I remember my father-in-law talking about it, and we kind of laughed, how are you going to make any money running a sharpening shop? Back then it was just sharpening. And I was passing it and thought, I'll go back and take a look because the whole property is for sale. So I took a look. We were able to negotiate a deal with the then owner, and we ended up buying the place. And the shop, the original gentleman, the founder, Chuck Giles, had died a few years before. So there was a lot of work to do to get it up and running. But his wife, Trilby, was there, and we were able to get it going again, just as something to do between other businesses, because I was still doing other things on the road. Yeah, we ended up running it. It got bigger, and I just did sharpening back then. That's all we did. We didn't really sell anything retail. I grew up in retail and jewelry, and I wasn't really looking to do anything more retail. But then a friend of mine came in, Brad Ingram, and he says, "Man, you got to start carrying knives." And I said, "Brad, I really don't want to do that." And he said, "No, you got to do it. You got to do it." So I got about a dozen knives in a day. They were gone.
Wow.
So I put that money into more knives, and then more knives, and then more knives. And now we carry, during the holiday season, we've got $1 million worth of inventory.
Wow. Oh, man. That's fantastic. Like I mentioned before, we did a previous podcast, just a basic kind of talking about knives and shapes. If you had nothing. Sure. So if you were, maybe you had a basic knife, but you're ready to kind of get a little bit higher end, or what do I need to look for in a good knife or knives for the kitchen?
Probably the knife that's most used by any chef or any serious, even not so serious home cook or chef is going to be the 8-inch chef's knife. Okay. Everybody needs an 8-inch chef's knife. So that's the first shape or size of a knife that you need. It's an 8-inch chef's knife. After that
happens to be my favorite, actually, too.
Well, once you know how to use a chef's knife and you learn the pinch grip and you get used to it and you do a little practice with it, you wonder why you were cutting up everything with a paring knife. It makes no sense anymore. So chef's knife is that's 80-90% of what you're going to use. After that, you can get into other specialty knives meant for other things, but chef's knife is really the workhorse of the kitchen. And probably, I wouldn't necessarily buy an inexpensive chef's knife to start with, because if you buy a lousy knife, you are not going to be happy with it. It's not going to hold an edge. The edge that's on it, once it's sharpened, is not going to be very good, and it's going to be a real bother. I would wait. You hold off, save some money, get into a better knife. Not necessarily super expensive, but certainly much better. And the best way to do that is to go to a specialty shop. Specialty shops, there's usually people there who actually know what they're talking about, and especially if it's a cutlery store. Now, there's not a ton of us left, but if it's a true cutlery store, then you're going to find a staff that really knows what they're doing. And you can get something that has a good quality steel, because everything's about steel. really. I mean, that's first and foremost what you want to look at with a knife.
Yeah, I would totally agree. And I don't know if David shared this with you, but we actually met when we were working at a kind of a higher end culinary store. It's more of a corporate type, but there's a place for that. But I applaud the locally owned as well. But it was so important when I would sell those knives, for someone to just be able to hold it and feel it, like you say, check the balance and the weight and all of that. I mean, you got to put it in your hand, to know if you're going to be happy with that. So I totally agree.
Sure.
With what you're saying.
Well, it's a whole package, really. But the first question, once you find a knife that you like and that looks good, you think you might want to take it home, is to find out what steel is in it. And then if you go online, you look up a knife chart. There's a number of knife charts in there that you'll be able to find that steel and see where that steel, how it compares to all the other steels. And there's really four properties we look at with steel. There's toughness, corrosion resistance, edge retention, and sharpenability. So that's the way that we measure one steel against another, looking at toughness, corrosion resistance, edge retention, and sharpenability. So that's how we compare steels. So for some people, they want to absolutely make sure that they don't have a knife that will rust at all ever.
Okay.
For other people, for most people, really, it's edge retention. How well is it going to hold an edge? Other people don't care about
staying sharp.
Yes, staying sharp. Okay. Edge retention, how long does it stay sharp after you sharpen it? Other people, they want it to be very, very easy to sharpen, so they want a softer steel. So it really depends on what the person who's going to use the knife wants, what their emphasis is on. As to which steel they're going to choose. But a true specialty cutlery store, they know all the steels.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there.
There's a ton of steels, and we have a pretty good idea of what the most common ones are for sure. And if there's a steel there that we're not fully familiar with, we have the resources to find out what it is and how it's going to perform for that particular use. But it's all about steel. If it's got a lousy steel, there's one brand, and I won't mention the brand on here, though I do on my channel quite a bit. But there's one brand that's one of the biggest knife making companies in the U.S., if not the biggest, and they're very, very expensive, and they're sold by young people, typically in college, and sold to their families and friends and so forth. And it's a terrible steel. It's a terrible steel, and it's a lot of money.
Wow.
And they're a terrible steel. So, plastic handle and bad steel, but still $150, $200 knife.
Wow.
So it's kind of sad that they tell people this is the best cutlery steel in the world, and they freely admit that. They freely tell you this is the best cutlery steel in the world, and it's not.
Right. Wow.
It's just not. So, you've got to be kind of careful. But if you go to a true cutlery store, they're not going to have that brand there.
Right.
And they're going to show you some knives at different price points that will have a steel that you're probably going to be pretty happy with.
Gotcha. And so what about, if I decide to invest in a higher end, knife or set of knives after maybe I've started out with my basic knife, how do I take care of that? What do I need to do?
Great question. The first and foremost, the thing you need to do is make sure you steel the knife each time you use it. Now, a butcher steel is nothing more than a steel rod. Most of them that you're going to use at home will have little ridges in it. Sometimes the butchers will use what we call a burnisher. It'll be smooth. But most of the time, it'll have little ridges in it. And you can tell the difference in quality just by feeling it. It'll feel kind of silky if it's a really good quality butcher steel. And you run the knife along the butcher steel, going from the heel to the tip, away from the edge. You can go towards the edge as well, but typically you want to go away from the edge in order to bring up that edge, because as you're using a knife, the edge will fold, and you want to keep it straight and extend that time between sharpenings, because every time you sharpen a knife, you're removing steel. So we don't want to do that more than we absolutely have to, because eventually you can't put the steel back. So you use a butcher steel each time. Now, the butcher steel doesn't work for some of the very high-end powdered steels that are out now. they just laugh at a butcher steel. So for those, you need a fine abrasive, ceramic, or another type of abrasive in order to do that. And they make abrasive rods that work for those. But for most of your typical Wusthoffs and Hinkels, which is Willing, and for most of the forged knives, they're going to work well on that. And certainly all the carbon knives, which is really what the butcher steel was designed for originally, was carbon knives, not the stainlesses. But most of the forged stainlesses are soft enough that you can steel those well, and it'll bring that edge up each time. Now, when the butcher steel doesn't work, it's time to go to abrasive, remove a little bit of steel, and bring that edge back again.
Okay, so how do I know that it's not working? Well, what
the
point,
butcher steel?
When I'm using my knife and I know I need to get it sharpened, what does that feel like?
Knife is as the knife does. So if you go to cut something and it slips off, that's dangerous, and that's a dull knife. I could always tell when I'm cutting mushrooms, especially if the mushrooms are a day or two old. They got kind of that slimy stuff going on. And you go up there with your little claw, and you put the knife up to the knuckles, and you go to cut, and it slides off the edge. And you go to cut, and it slides off the edge. If it's not with almost no effort, if it's not just biting and just going right through without me having to do hardly anything, that knife needs to be worked on. It needs to be steeled, first of all. And if I go back and I steel it again and it's still doing that slip, then I need to go to an abrasive. And for that, we've got here at Bear Claw, we have a ceramic rod that's like $10. And it's a big honking ceramic rod. It's about $10. And you could do the same thing you do with a butcher steel, but on the ceramic rod. And it will generally bring that edge back if it's just a little bit off. But now it's a smooth ceramic. So if it's really dull, like if you've been cutting on granite countertop,
right, or glass.
Oh, good Lord.
The glass cutting board.
I hate them. But if you're cutting on that stuff, it's very abrasive to the edge. Your edge is going to be really dull, and you'll be there all day long trying to sharpen on a very smooth ceramic. So at that point, when that doesn't work, then you need to go to a more aggressive abrasive.
Gotcha.
Either a stone or a system or whatever you have that you're going to sharpen with.
One of the things we talked about in our last podcast was about having your knives sharpened professionally. It's not that expensive, and it's such a great way to have good sharp knives in the kitchen. Kind of talk to me about that a little bit.
Well, a professional sharpener typically sharpens on belts. And most of us use a ceramic belt, which actually sharpens very cool. It's ceramic, so it does a great job. Ceramic is almost as hard as diamond, so it'll sharpen up all the harder steels as well. So we'll do the first coarse grit with a ceramic belt, and then we go to a silicon carbide for your just to smooth out that serration a little bit. And then most of us finish on leather, or we finish on a hard felt wheel with some chromium oxide, which is a compound, which gets rid of that burr that forms on the edge when you're sharpening. So it's pretty quick. Now, for us, we only charge $4.25 to sharpen a knife.
That's amazing.
And that's any size.
Yeah.
And if the tip is broken off, we won't charge you anything more just to redress that and turn it back into a real-looking normal knife. But we're very fast. I mean, we sharpen, obviously, a lot of blades, and people send us blades from all over the country. The thing is, though, is we've got 20, 30 seconds to sharpen a knife. When you're at home, you're not going to buy a $3,000 belt, Burr King. So you're going to be sharpening on a stone. It's going to take you a little bit longer, but essentially you're doing the same thing. Now, Work Sharp is a company that has a belt sharpener that's out, and it's one of the few things that we recommend that you can pull through. And it's a belt, and it uses a slack belt just like what we do, which puts a slight convex edge on the edge. And so the Work Sharp system, we like that. Just keep in mind that bad things can happen very quickly when you're using motors. That's moving pretty fast.
Exactly.
So start with one of your not so important knives.
How often, if I cook on a really regular basis, how often do I need it? In my mind, is it once a year, twice a year?
To have a knife professionally sharpened? That's a great question. It's a question a lot of people ask me. if it's a little flippant, but if somebody says, how often should I sharpen my knife? I said, well, if you never use it, you never have to sharpen
there
it.
You go.
So somewhere between that and every day is going to be your answer.
Gotcha.
With a knife, if you're a professional chef, you're butchering all day, or you're butcher steeling, you're using that butcher steel all day long, and you're probably sharpening at least once a day, if not 2 or 3 times a day. If you're a sushi chef, see, I said that without all my S's getting, But if you're filleting fish all day long, cutting up fish, that has to be ridiculously sharp. So they tend to use a carbon steel blade, and it's a geometry that's very, very thin, ridiculously sharp, but they tend to go dull pretty quickly. So they sharpen on Japanese water stones, typically. They use a much lower angle, but their knives are literal razors, and they're cutting like crazy. But they're probably going to sharpen at least first thing in the morning, and then probably later in that afternoon as well.
Wow.
And in order just to keep it to where it just glides through the meat effortlessly. So it really depends on the knife. It depends on the steel. It depends on what you're cutting on. You mentioned glass cutting boards.
Yeah. Let's talk about cutting boards real quick.
Sure.
Yeah. So, Jennifer and I, we talked a little bit about this previously, and, you've seen wood. Wood was the thing for long, hundreds of years, and then we got into other materials, plastics and glass, which, different,
solid surface material.
Exactly, solid surface material. Yeah. So, we use mainly plastic, the kind of the white restaurant-y grades you can throw in the dishwasher, and then we had wood at one point. So what do you recommend, and as far as cutting boards and care and that type of thing?
I like wood best.
Okay.
I like the way it looks. I like the way it feels under the knife. The plastic cutting boards, the typical white plastic cutting boards, and now they come in all colors, so you can separate your boards. You can have a green board for vegetables. You can have a red board for red meats, and so on and so forth. And they're fine. They tend to get a lot of cuts in the surface, and you can have them resurfaced, but it's fairly expensive. But you get a lot of cuts in the surface. It's nice that you can throw them in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
But really, truly, they've done a number of studies now, and you could pull these up online. This is not me talking. This is different colleges who've done the studies. They've introduced bacteria to the surface of these boards, wood boards and plastic boards. In every instance, they were surprised by the fact that on the plastic boards, the bacteria became huge. I mean, it grew overnight.
Really?
But on the wood boards, there was never bacteria by the next morning. So they think that there's an enzyme in the wood that the wood pulls in the bacteria, and the enzymes kill the bacteria. So they've been using wood boards now for thousands of years, since people were people. And now we're finding out that they're actually safer than the plastic boards.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. Old is new again.
Yes, exactly.
That's right.
So how do you take care of a wooden cutting board, because they can be expensive?
They can be.
How do you take care of them?
Well, it's pretty easy. There's really 2 types of wood cutting boards. There's end grain, which is all the little blocks that are end grain. So the tree grows straight up and down. You cut a section off, and that's an end grain board, right? Then we glue up all the squares. It usually looks like a bunch of little squares glued together. And the good thing about those is that you're actually cutting with the grain. So they're fairly self-healing. They look better longer, and they feel better under the knife. But then you also have the boards that are flat sawn or cross-cut, however you want to call it, where the grain goes across the board. And that looks like longer pieces of wood that are glued together. And those are great for doing carving, for instance. Now you can use those for doing knife work and doing prep work with your vegetables. You can do that, and that's fine. I mean, they're cutting boards, so it works. But it's going to get looking cut up sooner, because you're cutting across grains instead of with the grain. In either case, once a board starts drying out, you want to put some mineral oil on it. And there's lots of different board oil and treatments out there. Some of them contain beeswax. They contain other materials, but most of them are mineral-based. mineral oil based, and you can use food grade oil, but some of these food grade oils can go rancid over time and make that board smell.
Like the seed oils and things. I know can go rancid very easily. Yeah.
Yeah, they can go
well,
bad.
And here's a question about maybe like about sanitizing. Now, I read like an autobiography years ago of Julia Child and how she, studied at the cordon bleu, and they were, of course, using the wood cutting boards and butcher blocks and that kind of thing. And I think she said that to sanitize them after they had done, meat, that they would use maybe like lemon juice and salt or something. Is that a good thing to use to?
Not really for a wood board. Here's the thing with wood. Once you're done cutting on wood, most of what you do on a board is not meats. And if you do meats, you probably want to use a separate board anyways, instead of using your prep board. But once you're done using the board, you can just take I have a sink full of dishwater when I'm cooking anyways, and I'm cleaning as I go. But you just grab your towel, right, and get it wet and go over to your board, or take the board over to the sink and just wipe all the stuff off of there. The wood will take care of the rest. The wood takes care of the rest. Remember, bacteria, typically the wood's going to kill the bacteria. And so, you don't have to worry about it as much with a wood board. Now, with a plastic board, you definitely have to worry about it. You want to get every bit of that stuff off the board, and you want to get rid of the bacteria for sure.
Gotcha.
So being able to sanitize that and a dishwasher is probably a good thing. Now, if you put a wood cutting board in the dishwasher,
no bueno.
It's going to come out pieces. I had a gentleman.
Not a good idea.
No, I had a gentleman come in. It was just a couple months ago, and he literally had a box with little pieces. It was a nice ingrain cutting board, and it had all little pieces of wood in there, and it'll completely come apart.
Oh, goodness.
And
bless his heart.
And we said, you can't throw these in the dishwasher. And he goes, I didn't throw it in the dishwasher. I didn't do it. It just came apart by itself.
Right.
I didn't have anything to do with it.
Well, somebody must have.
Yeah, they definitely did. Yeah, that's the thing with wood. But you wipe that down, the wood takes care of the rest, and it has for centuries. If you go, I'm from New England originally. I'm from Connecticut, and all the delis up there, whether they're Italian delis or Jewish delis, they all have this big butcher block back there, and usually it's been used for 100 plus years, 200 years, or even more, and it'll be all cupped out
in the middle,
and they're still using that thing to cut up meats and sandwiches and everything all day long, every day. And it's just as good as the day they bought it 200 years ago when the store first opened. So, wood is a good thing. It's beautiful. It's I just love wood. It's just natural. And the way things are right now, people are trying to get back to the basics. And wood is that.
For sure.
Yeah. Cool. And so, what about? Let's go. I guess circle back to knives again. Kind of what do you tell people to look for in a knife? Now, like we talked about steels a little bit, but to be more specific, like what kind of steel? Do you have brands that you like? Did you have, I don't know. Go ahead.
Well, we can start with the German cutleries.
Okay.
The German companies, the two German companies, the Wusthof, Zwilling, and all these big knife companies, they all have several lines. But if you look for something that is a knife that a chef would use, you're going to get a German cutlery steel. I won't go into all the part numbers and everything on them, but they're fairly soft. They're at a Rockwell, typically 56, 58. And at that Rockwell, it's easy to keep those and maintain those. Okay. So they're easy to take care of, keep them sharp. Now, out of China, we have some very nice knives coming out of China. You got to be careful with China. Well, with everybody now, you have to be careful. Yeah. But there's a couple of good brands. We carry Kingshan, and they're making some phenomenal knives right now, and in a wide range of steels. They've got a 14C28N, which is a Sandvik steel, which is a very pure steel. It's a nice stainless without being expensive, and it's a nice steel. But you can go all the way up to their Tom Keller line, which is a high-end powdered steel from Crucible, which is a U.S. steel maker. Now, on our YouTube channel, we're actually going to be visiting with Crucible in Niagara.
Oh, wow.
And showing folks how these steels are made, how they go from raw materials to a billet that goes to their knife maker.
Oh, that's going to be cool.
And so, yeah, it's going to be a fun one. We're going to be exploring powdered steels and newer technology. But those steels, like what's in the Thomas Keller line, is just, they're amazing. But they're a very hard steel. They're up at a Rockwell 63 or more. And they're a little more difficult. You have to sharpen them on diamond or ceramic because the other, sharpening media is not hard enough. And a little tougher to take care of. Well, not hard,
right?
Just a little tougher. So it varies quite a bit. And there's lots of other companies out there. But you'd be surprised how many companies that everybody knows the name of has a terrible knife.
Yeah, wow.
And people get it, and they just don't understand why it's not performing like it should, why it doesn't hold an edge, why it doesn't cut like the people using it, the chefs on TV are using it. And it's because they're different steels.
Yeah, gotcha.
Right,
the one they make for the chef has a high-end, beautiful steel, and the one you get at the big box store, not necessarily.
Yeah.
So
how do you really know the difference? What do I need to do if I run into that situation?
Well, if you find a brand that you like, that you trust, the first thing you want to do, once you hold it, you like what it looks like, you found the blocks that you want, ask them what kind of steel it is. And if they tell you stainless steel, just look at them with that woolly eyeball and say,
what kind of stainless steel?
How about we get a little more specific than that?
Yeah.
There's companies out there, they'll say it's surgical stainless. Well, that means nothing.
Gotcha.
What steel is it? If they won't tell you, don't buy the knives.
And can they tell you like the hardness of it?
Well, they should be able to tell you the part number of it and what company makes it.
Gotcha.
Once you have that information, you can get to your steel chart online. Remember, all the information in the world is now contained in our pocket.
Exactly.
Right? So they can't pull one over on us anymore. Yeah. It's important for you to be educated. You don't have to spend a whole ton of money on a knife, but if you want to get a decent knife, you're going to spend some money. You're at least $100 for a chef's knife, at least. So you want to know what it is you're getting. And there's a lot of $200, $300 chef's knives out there, $500 chef's knife that have lousy steel. Some companies will just throw the price up there thinking that the price will equal quality and people will just buy it because it's an expensive knife. And they're right, people will.
Right.
But you won't. You folks out there listening, that's why you listen to this blog, is because you get to learn the real way of doing things. Find out what the steel is, and then go to your knife chart online, find out more about that particular steel and how it measures up against other steels. And it doesn't hurt before you go knife shopping to actually learn a little bit about steels. And then the second thing is, there are some box stores that'll have people working there that actually know what they're doing. But in most cases, they just speak like they know what they're doing, but they really don't. Specialty stores are still the best
way to go.
You may spend a little bit more, but what you get for service and knowledgeable people is just, it's well worth it.
So would you suggest somebody buy a set of knives or buy knives at a time?
That's a great question. That comes down to budget. If you've got a budget, I lean towards, and we do this a lot in our store, bring a block from home, because you probably already have a block there at home that you like. Get rid of the knives or bring them to your knife store, and they'll use them for, sharpening practice when they train a new sharpener or whatever. But if you're buying knives, sometimes it's better just to get the particular knives that you want. Because when you buy a set, for instance, a lot of people, they never make bread. They never cut bread. They're not going to use a bread knife. But almost every set has a bread knife in it. Almost every set has a utility knife. Now, what is a utility knife? What does that really mean? We sell some here. We sell utility knives. But when I think about it, I'm thinking, utility knife? What am I using the knife to open up packages? Or, that's really more for the scissors. So I have specific knives that I want to get. I want to get a boning knife so I could debone my chickens and other meats, when I need to use that. It's for meats. I'm going to have a paring knife in there for doing more detail work. I'm going to have a 6-inch 8-inch chef's knife. I'm going to have a 6 or 7-inch Santoku, which I like to call my fajita knife because it cuts meats and vegetables equally well, and it's got that straighter edge than a chef's knife. Not meant for mincing or dicing, but definitely julienne cuts. You know, if I'm making fajitas, I'm reaching for that.
Gotcha.
That santoku. And I might have one or two others in there. A fillet knife if I eat a lot of fish and I like filleting my own, whole fish. So you get the knives, just the knives that you want, and you put them in your own block. If you don't have a block, the knife store is going to have some blocks for you. Or they can get some for you.
And I think one of the underappreciated things, and my wife taught me, Jennifer taught me this, the kitchen shear.
Oh, yeah.
She loves them.
Yeah.
I never, ever used one until we got married.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't function without a good pair of kitchen shears.
To
me, that's essential.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, take apart shears so you can clean them well.
Exactly.
And they're not usually the best quality shears out there, but they'll cut through what you need it to. So if you're cutting vegetables, and it's especially good for taking apart a chicken. Why get pieces of chicken? You can get, especially if you have a family. Now, I'm a single guy, so I can live off of one thigh, so it's fine. But if I've got a family, I'm not buying chicken thighs or chicken breasts. I'm getting a whole chicken, and I'm cutting that up, or I'm deboning it, one or the other. But I'm not going to buy the different pieces. And with good kitchen shears,
it takes
good. Everything from opening up, the package of mozzarella cheese to taking a chicken apart in about 3 seconds.
Right. I just would rather have something I know is only for food than the scissors. I'm not sure what we were using the scissors for craft-wise last, and I know the kitchen shears are kitchen.
Yeah, you just use them for
and
the
then you
food.
take them apart and scrub them up.
Good. Yeah. Shears are a great thing to have in the kitchen.
It's awesome. Do you have anything else, Jennifer?
Well, I guess, and this may have been kind of answered before, but do you have like a favorite knife? Would it be, a cook's knife or chef's knife, or do you have anything that's just kind of like your go-to every time, or does it just depend on what you're cooking?
It really depends on what I'm working on, but most of what I use a knife for is vegetable prep, and that's going to be my 8-inch chefs. If I've got a big pile of parsley, I'm going to be going to a 10-inch chef's or even bigger, because you're going from a big pile to a little.
You use the leverage, you rock it, and it helps with this big.
You can really slice through a big, with a larger chef's knife. But typically, I'm reaching for that 8-inch chef's knife, or a 7-inch santoku. And that's typically what I'll use. And most of the time, 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be that chef's knife. Now, the boning knife, if I'm doing anything with meats or I'm trimming, it's going to be that boning knife, because the geometry on the boning knife is specifically for meats.
Now, is that a more rigid one or a flexible one?
I use a semi-flex, but they come in all three. They come in flexible, semi-flex, and then the stiffer ones. And they're usually 6-inch or so is about the right size. And they're really made for dealing with meats, either trimming fat or like chicken. I like to get that extra fat off the chicken thighs, and a good boning knife with a good edge that you could actually just take and scrape that fat right off effortlessly. It was funny. I was at my daughter's place up in Pennsylvania. She lives up in the Poconos, and I had gotten her a bunch of nice Wusthof knives, and she had them in a box on top of the refrigerator because she was afraid to use them because they were so sharp. So she's actually making dinner, and she has 7 of my many grandchildren, and she's making dinner, and I noticed she's struggling trying to cut chicken, which if you have a sharp knife, is pretty easy. And she's struggling. I look at her and, what are you doing? And she says she's got this really cheapy, terrible knife that's got no edge. And I said, what did you do with the knives that I sent? She goes, well, they're up there. So I grabbed them down. I grabbed the 6-inch boning knife, and I cut through the chicken like it was butter. And then I handed it to her, and she could not believe the difference. Now, that was really extreme.
Right.
But I tell you what, if you've got a good quality knife and you keep it sharp, your life is going to be so much easier, and it's going to be fun to cook again.
Right. And I think, you mentioned the buying the chicken parts versus the whole chicken. I wonder how much of that is from people who had bad knives, who struggled. Is that I can just buy it pieces. It's so much easier.
Oh, well, you see, in every grocery store, you see pre-prepped vegetables. You see onions already diced.
Yeah.
You see everything already prepped, and it's so much more expensive. Right. Prepping that stuff is easy if you know how. And let me tell you, the University of YouTube, there are so many really fine chefs on there that will teach you how to use an 8-inch chef's knife. And once you know how, once you get that pinch grip down, once you get the little claw going on the left hand or right hand, depending on whether you're left-handed or right, once you have that down, life as cooking is
fun.
It's fun.
Like you said.
Prepping is fun. Yeah. Cutting stuff up is fun. I tell you, when I make soup, the actual vegetables that I'm cutting up, it's like an animation thing where they actually go up in the air in a big loop, and then they fall into the pot, and it's just it's fast.
A beautiful thing.
I could cut up all the stuff I need for a vegetable stew in about a heartbeat.
Yeah,
it's fun to do.
Well, thank you for joining us today, Richard.
I was just going to say, I think we've said it before, a good knife really makes you a better cook. And, same for good pots and pans. But, it just, like you were saying, it can make such a difference.
It turns it from a struggle to fun.
It really does. It really does. Cooking should be fun.
It should be.
And it's so much healthier if you're buying all fresh stuff. Get away from the boxes. They're terrible for you.
Yes.
Get to fresh vegetables, fresh meats, the good stuff. You're going to be a lot healthier for it. Your family's going to be a lot healthier. Kids are going to be easier to manage. And you're going to have fun making dinner again. And by the way, people, if they want to get some of the good stuff, we only carry things that are worth the money you pay for.
Right.
You don't have to spend a lot of money. But if you spend $20 on a knife at Bear Claw, you're getting $20 worth. If you're spending $300 on a knife at Bear Claw, you're getting $300 worth. And that's really all people want.
Right.
So you can go to bcknife.com, B as in bear, C as in claw, knife, singular, bcknife.com. And we have just about everything we have in the store we've got on there. Or you can come see us in Midland, Texas. We'll be happy to sit down with you.
And you mentioned your YouTube channel.
Yes, YouTube. It's Richard Steinberg Making Knives. We actually visit knife makers around the country. Soon it's around the world, and see how they make knives, whether it's individual makers or companies. And we do, both the culinary side and the sporting side as well. And then we also talk about, everything that's knife related, from cutting boards to, how to use the knife, to how to sharpen it, how to use the butcher steel. We talk about a lot of those issues. And so go see us on our vlog on YouTube, Richard Steinberg Making Knives.
And we'll have links in the description. And for Sweet Tea and Tacos, I'm Dave.
And I'm Jen.
And don't forget to share and tell your friends about the podcast. And hey, go check out our website. And we have some new links on there about supporting us. And we've got some more episodes coming out shortly. So stay tuned.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for letting us do this, Richard. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Excellent. Really appreciate you watching. Make sure you check out their blog. Tell us again.
Sweet Tea and Tacos.
Sweet Tea and Tacos.
On all your podcast feeds.
It's very cool stuff. And if you have any questions for us, you know how to reach us for sure. Just put something down there. Don't forget the thumbs up. And don't forget to hit the follow there for us. We want you all following us.
Subscribe it.
So subscribe. Yeah, the subscribe button. So appreciate you joining us. Until next time, see you then.